Everyone, welcome to our kickoff session of Products by Women in Amsterdam. And today we're going to be talking about job search and recruitment in the Netherlands and in the US. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself and kind of explaining why this session is happening. So I spent most of my, education in the US. I graduated from NYU, New York University, and then I did my graduate studies at Columbia University. And we've been always learning so much at their career design centers about how to write resume and what are the must-haves and what are the do-nots. And then after COVID, I relocated back to Europe, and I realized that there is such a huge discrepancy between the requirements that I had to start relearning how things are done in Europe. And a good example of that is that, for example, in the US, we would always be told you should never include a picture on your resume because your resume will be rejected because you included a picture. While here, it turns out that a picture is something that you should have on a resume. So this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to organize a session with you. And this will be our kickoff Products by Women Amsterdam session. So our amazing guest speaker today is Dora, who works at Bird in Amsterdam. So Dora, welcome so much. And we are so honored to have you here as a speaker. And you have so much knowledge about this topic. So it's so exciting. And I would love, to take a minute to allow you to introduce yourself and, tell us a bit more about what is it that you do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for, coming up with this idea while we were brainstorming for something else. I think it is really important. And I really found out during especially COVID, a lot of people reached out to me, helped me with my CV, helped me with my cover letter. I really think it is very important to talk about things that are, do's or don'ts. But about me, I've been recruiting for about 5 years now. I come from an in-house corporate environment, and I moved to an agency model afterwards just to end up in the end with the startup world, which is by far my favorite, but it's obviously everyone has their own preference. You'll see that everything I try to reply to every single question that was given to me that was submitted by you guys. I try to give my personal experience and opinion about things. So these are not set in stone. Of course, there's no right or wrong way for applying or writing CVs. I think that the main question is, what is it that recruiters in general are looking for? So I let you be the judge of what works for you and what doesn't, and I try to give as many tips and tricks as possible in order to make sure that you leave with a new perspective on job search.
Yes, and the way the session is going to be structured is that we're going to have around 40 minutes of, discussion with Dora, and then we're going to leave some time for Q&A, at least 10 to 15 minutes. And if you have any questions in the meantime, then just feel free to put them in the chat, and we will do our best to address them as well as we go. So let's start with the first few questions about the main differences between the US and the Netherlands. So what are the key differences between applying to jobs in the Netherlands and in the US?
Yeah, so I wrote down a couple of things that I think are important. I think that the type of offerings for jobs can be quite different as well. The Netherlands is quite a big on the tech hub. It's a very big startup hub as well, but it doesn't have a lot of corporation, for example, while in the US, you can really find everything from Silicon Valley to LA to New York, and you can find all the different types of offerings that you can apply to. I think the second biggest difference is timelines. While in the US, you guys are super used to, oh, I can, change jobs in 2 weeks. I can join a new job in 2 weeks. That also gives, obviously, a sort of sense of urgency for every recruiter who works on US roles. But in the Netherlands, it's more like you have a 1 to 2 months notice period. So the whole process of the interviewing can be a bit slower as well. Although I can't say that that's true for any startups because we always try to go 100%. But at the same time, that I feel like a lot of people that I'm talking to right now with hiring for the US, they already have like 15 other processes going on, and then I kind of feel like always this sense of urgency of getting ahead of the other offers and trying to get the best people in. third biggest thing I wrote down is sponsorship and visa. I know that now I'm getting really familiar with the US processes, and I know that it can be super tedious and long. In the Netherlands and in EMEA in general, it is usually easier. I think the Netherlands is a good example because we have normally just ranges of salaries based on which you're able to support someone rather than what the position is or what the company is. And it also doesn't take that long. I think that the longest it's taken is probably like 6 to 8 weeks, and then you can start working, and companies are quite open to do it here as well. The last piece I wrote down is the type of employment. In the US, obviously you have the at-will contract that you have, so you have a permanent employment, but you're also can be made redundant within 2 weeks, and you can also leave your job within 2 weeks. In the Netherlands and in EMEA in general, we have fixed-term contracts that we usually start with, which can vary from 6 to 12 months, or and then afterwards you are eligible to get permanent opportunity. But with the permanent opportunity, you have a lot of power as an employee as well, towards any sort of firings or redundancy.
This is super interesting. So, in terms of the timelines, and many people had a question about knowing Dutch. If someone wants to work in the Netherlands, is it necessary to know Dutch?
So I've been here 9 years, and I hate to admit it, but I also am not fluent myself. It is not that important, but you need to just make sure that you apply for international companies. And also all the job descriptions are, when they are in English, usually if they are not specifically asking for Dutch as a language skill, you won't be needing it.
And how about referrals? Because in the US, the importance of referrals keeps on being emphasized, that, oh, if you want to work somewhere, just start with looking for people to refer you. Is it also that important in the Netherlands?
So I think that referrals within the company are always reviewed, especially I think with us as well. Like, we review them the same way you would review any application, and I would still give my honest opinion to the person who referred them. The only, I think, extra weight that it might carry is that I might look at it earlier because someone within the company reaches out to me, and then I don't have to go through 300 or 400 CVs to get to that one person. But at the same time, of course, because we are always striving to get the best people, and if the experience doesn't line up with what we're looking for, then we would not be proceeding with them the same way we wouldn't if they just apply.
Okay, interesting. So it seems like at the end of the day, it still comes down to whether you are actually qualified for a given position, and referral is just a matter of the order, in a way, like in which you look at the applications. Cool.
Absolutely.
Very, very useful. So now let's jump right into resume, which is a super interesting topic. And one of the questions that kept on coming up was about the difference between a resume and a CV, and if there is any.
Yeah, so I think that the main difference is that the US is used to resumes and the Europeans are used to CVs. CV is basically like a full history of your credentials, of the length of the employment, the skills that you have, and also maybe any extracurricular that you've done. And the resumes are basically a 1 or 2 pager, very short, very condensed experience list, basically, and also containing your education, which is usually what they prefer in the US, to have a very, small and 1 pager where you can have all your experiences. So we don't have to like scroll through 3 pages to read through the full experience. But I do think that it's really shifting right now. I feel like I prefer resumes, but only because I do think that 3 pages are quite long. However, I do think that it can be 1 to 2 pages. That I think would be the rule of thumb here.
And in terms of well, you kind of touched upon that, but the second question, in terms of the differences in the format in the US and the Netherlands, what are some of the key differences, including like the layout and and any other sections that you might include? And I know that we have some supporting pictures as well, so let me know and I will skip to those slides.
Sure. Yeah, so what I actually wanted to maybe just touch on is not as much as how long or how the formatting should be. I think what it comes down to is how aesthetic it is. And that's why I have also visual examples that I found online. So no worries, I didn't break any GDPR
right
here.
Now.
Sure. As you can see, there are 2 examples. These are what I call either the empty example or the wordy example. So the first one is just really, really, really a lot of information in one page with no spacing. And that is something that I think is just really hurtful for the eye to see. While if you look at the empty one, it just really looks like you haven't really done much and you're just trying to fill up the space. Now, this is also a good picture to talk about the fact that no picture, that I know that was a question before, and I want to touch on it here. I think we have so many unconscious biases in ourselves, and me as a recruiter, I also need to remind myself sometimes. I catch myself having those biases. I think that no picture is the way to go, because you don't want people to be judging you on anything else but your experience. So that's why the wordy is more like my preference over the empty one, where you have a really big picture as well. What I also wanted to maybe say, and maybe you can go to the next one. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, so you talked about formatting, and I want to touch on this as well. So as you can see from these two examples, these are like not so good examples. I am not against color, but I'm against color that is taking away from your experience. So what I also always believe is that your experience should speak for itself, and you don't need anything around it to sugarcoat that experience. I also understand that creative people would love to do more creative CVs as well, but you always need to be mindful of your audience, and your audience is the recruiter first and foremost. So I need to be able to see, I need to be able to read, I need to be able to see through. And on the first one, you can already see that there's not much information about someone's background. And what I find a lot between US and also European CVs is that titles are very different. You can be a head of, you can be a director, you can be a lead, with 1 year experience. While in Europe, that can be that you need to be at least like a senior director level with 10 years experience. And if I don't see any sort of information under your titling, I'm not going to be able to probably understand your level. And I think that is more important to have at least a couple of bullets under what were you responsible for, or what level was the position at, rather than having, a super colorful CV.
And you also talked a bit about the size. Is there like a minimum, maximum font that you like, a range of font size that you would say is acceptable and preferred?
I think we can check the next page. I think I put some examples around what fonts would work. And no, this is still the color choice. Okay, so
still the colors.
No, that's fine. So I wanted to say I'm not against color. As you can see, the first one in my eyes is a good CV because it is see-through. It's black and white where it needs to be, and the color is sort of on the side. While the right one in my eyes is really difficult to see. You can see that the white barely comes off the yellow. It is hard to read, and obviously the sort of light gray as the employee history and education is also just really difficult to see. Again, the font size and the font itself should be something that is professional, and also I think that the font size should be something that I don't have to squint to read it, or like try to like maximize the page to be able to read your CV. So I think like an 11 or a 12 at maximum as a font size would be. If you go to the next one, I think I've added some font size. So here, left one, good fonts, right? No good fonts. So the no good font means that it just looks a bit maybe on the childish side, or maybe something that you would use earlier on in high school or something. I think it needs to be a font that is easily readable, that is not going to change formatting when you're converting from PDF to doc, which can happen quite a bit. So that's why I've added these just as an example of what would be the good font to use and what isn't.
Great. So I think this is the last slide with those visual examples. So we should go back.
Sure.
Oh, actually, one sec. We do have one more with good. So let's talk about that, and then we're gonna go back to questions.
So good CV, and how does it look like? I know it sounds really easy, but black and white is the way to go. And I do think that if it's see-through, if the spacing is right, if the formatting is right, then I can say that that is a good CV to look at. What I feel that most people do is that, as I said, they're trying to add extra to it and to show personality, but that's something that I would leave for the cover letter. If you're also applying for a creative job, you will probably have to submit a portfolio. leave those things to that, because as I said, think about your audience. It's going to be me, it's going to be other people, not just the creative director or not just, you know, the hiring manager who's going to look at your CV, but other people as well who are in the interview panel. And this is your first impression that you're making on me, the company, you know, anybody basically who looks at it. So it needs to be very easily see-through and aesthetic.
Great.
I think there's a question, or there was at least a question before, on how to adjust one's resume and what do recruiters
Yeah.
consider must-haves and red flags.
Yes, exactly.
So we can add that to the questions around how a good CV looks like. What I wrote as a must-have is your information to the extent of the phone number and email address. Don't, maybe location, nice to have, just to understand, you know, where are you currently based. And then I also really think that a nice overview of your background in a chronological order. This is definitely important as well. And I do think that you don't really necessarily have to add any more information than that. I think that the address is not necessary, and some people add even more content to it. Maybe the only thing I could still think as a nice to have on your CV would be your nationality, but just because, so I don't have to wonder, you know, do we need to sponsor, where you're based, you know, just from, you know, the recruiter's understanding as well.
How
Now,
about, oh,
yeah,
I apologize. I just wanted to
no,
add
it's okay.
a quick follow-up question, which was about
Sure.
nationality. Because, for example, if you're within Europe, would it be enough to just write EU citizen, for example? Because
Yes,
then you can basically work within. Okay.
absolutely.
Yes, and then if for example you're in the US, then just US citizen, right? Or
Yes, exactly. I think it helps a lot also because, you know, if a recruiter already knows that we are not going to be able to, you know, facilitate any sort of sponsorship or visa help, that is also good for us, and it's not wasting your time or, you know, our time if we were not going to be able to, you know, move forward.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know
So
that
yeah,
no, go for it, go for it.
I wanted to also just touch on basically the red flags, because we talked about what a good CV looks like, and I think it's also important to understand of what are the things that are considered not so good, or what are the things that I see very commonly on CVs. So spelling mistakes. I know it sounds super easy, but it happens quite a lot. When we're looking for someone, we're always looking for people who are very detail oriented. So it is very important that you don't have spelling mistakes, you know, on your CV. So always double check that. The other thing that I want to mention is formatting errors. We already talked about this a little bit, but just having all different sizes of formatting, you know, not like one paragraph being a bit more to the left, the other one more to the right, you know, unless it's intentional and it looks intentional, it probably looks like it's a mistake. Here, I want to give a heads up to everybody that when you're actually converting PDF to doc or doc to PDF, it actually can change the formatting. So always double check to make sure that what you're submitting does not look bad, and it is how you intended it to look. Other thing that I want to mention, which is always confusing and takes us a bit of time to dig as a recruiter, is experience is overlapping with no additional information. So you can possibly have 3 roles at the same time and everything says present. But then I don't understand, are you a contractor? Are you part-time? Like it's good to give more context to what your situation is. It can be that you're freelancing, but then just say that it is a freelancer gig or that it is a contracting gig. So that's why I understand that you didn't not pay attention to put in the end dates for the previous experiences as well. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is not so much of a red flag, it's just more, it takes away from me being able to read through your experience, is bold words. So when you have customer service bolded, and then I you know, your eyes are immediately drawn to all those bold words, and then it's really hard to focus on everything else that's next to it because they are like screaming at you. The same with the colors as well. So that's what I wanted to mention as well. Now, what about mandatory sections in a CV? I think that was also a question previously. So employment history, education, skills, contact information, name. Like these are the things that I would say are super important. And I also want to maybe mention here that when you write a personal statement about yourself, that's totally fine. We all do it. Just don't write it in a third person. it is your CV, so it should be in a first person. I'm always a bit confused when people use a reference letter and then basically put it on their CV, because this is your CV, so you should be able to talk about yourself in a first person
Mhm.
as well.
And in terms
Yeah,
of
I think
the
that covers sort of because afterwards we had photo
Mhm.
or no photo, 1 page or 2 page. So I think 1 to 2 page is a good indication
Great.
to
Yes,
start with.
I have a quick follow-up question about the skill section that we see on the slide. I've heard mixed different opinions about like whether people should like add bullets to kind of show how proficient they are. I wonder what's your take about on that? Like for example, here we have like skills, illustrator, and like almost the whole bar is full. Oh gosh. Hello? Hello? Oh gosh. Hello? 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 Hello?
I
Hello?
think we're experiencing,
Can you hear me?
yes, yes, we can hear you, Gabby. I think we're experiencing some technical glitch and we lost
Is it
Dora. But
is it Dora? Okay, I didn't know what happened.
yeah, she's
I
Mhm.
back.
didn't know either. I just went off. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I got so scared. Okay, good. You're
No, it's
back.
okay.
Okay, good. Yes. So I just had a quick question about the skills section and having those bars or
Sure.
dots to kind of show how proficient you are. What's your take
Yeah,
on that? Is it helpful? I've heard very different opinions about that.
I don't mind them at all, actually.
Hmm.
I think that
Okay.
I think that it's good to sort of have an understanding on someone's ability. So I don't mind that part at all. And what I wanted to mention about the good CV here as well is that a lot of people ask me, where do I put the personal information, where do I put this, and where do I put like the sections. I think that, like, for my eyes, or I don't know how you feel about it, I think this formatting is really good. I like having the information, personal information, skill set on the left side, and then having like basically the experience in the middle, and that actually gives you also ability to be able to do a one pager, because you can sort of segment
Okay.
the one page.
Okay, so with that, this is incredibly useful so far, and let's move forward
Sure.
to talk about COVID and certain results of COVID. So,
Yeah.
have some skills become more relevant than others as a result of the current pandemic?
Yeah, I had to think about this a little bit, but I do think that it's not necessarily more important than it was before. I think it's just even more important that the applicant makes sure that the role that they're applying is good. Because I see a lot of LinkedIn posts saying, I applied for 100 jobs, I got 99 rejections. And
Hmm.
I do understand that it is a struggle at the moment, and I am totally familiar with the unemployment rate. I do, however, think that almost 100% rejection rate is not possible if you're applying for roles that are in your area.
Hmm.
So what that actually means then is that probably you need to make sure that everything that you believe you can do for that job is reflected on your CV as well. And I think we talk about that a bit later. You just really need to make sure that the job description truly matches your experience, and it's not just like, you know, 3 out of 10 criteria you can match, but they are
Hmm.
truly going to look for someone who's 10 or even 11 out of that 10,
Hmm.
given that there's such a demand for jobs right now and there's so many applications.
Hmm. And you spoke a bit about timelines, but let's talk a bit more about them. So,
Yeah.
have they changed as a result of the pandemic?
I can feel on how I work right now that it changed a little bit. It's just because I have triple amount of CVs to look through, and that also means that I need to be even more picky. Even, you need to even more condense basically the amount of CVs that you have. But at the same time, I also feel it just takes longer to get it done. So that's why what I would say that it takes a bit longer, yes, because it takes people longer to be able to read through the CVs and get back to you. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that just means that they are making sure that you are truly, the person that they want
Hmm.
to be chatting to. Um, Again, I have to say though that in the US it's a little bit different, just because I really feel that there's such a sense of urgency all the time, and other people already are in progress with some other companies. So That's the only thing I would say that I think in the US it shouldn't have changed that much. It just takes a bit longer maybe to get a reply from the recruiting team on your application. So I think like 2 weeks or so is a good time frame to give.
And how has the interview process itself changed as a result of the pandemic?
Yes, so obviously everything is remote. What we are trying to do is we are doing a lot of virtual, panel interviews on sites, whatever you may want to call it, where we just try to make sure that candidates are meeting as many stakeholders as possible, so that once they join, they will be able to see familiar faces on Zoom. I think that's normal. I think everybody is doing this right now, doing the remote interview process. So we are doing a lot of video interviews just so that people get familiar with faces. It's still a better way to, have interviews. I heard that some people do coffee and walk in the park interviews. I think that's also very nice, if you're not opposed to meeting someone face to face, because I think it also comes down to your personal preference as to how you would like to have the interviews conducted.
Okay, that's super interesting. And let's talk a bit about the cover letter, since we also talked about CVs and resumes. To what extent is it important in the Netherlands, and how should it look like also comparing to the US?
Yeah, I think it's not mandatory everywhere. I think that the company will always ask for it, or sometimes I've seen that they ask you just to type something in on a, in a sort of a text box format online when you're applying. I think that if you want to do it, as I said, if you want to show some personality, you want to make sure that, any extra information that you might have that is not reflected on your CV and you want to share, I think that's definitely good to do so. But then do make sure that it's personalized and it doesn't sound like something that where you just like interchange the company name or interchange, the recruiter's name, because then it just sounds dry. And I think that doesn't really showcase what you're actually writing the cover letter for. So one thing, make sure that the company name is correct. I've received way too many cover letters already where it was intended for another company, or it was a different role, a different position, and then it's just confusing, and then it all goes back to detail orientation and just the attention to detail. If you want to stand out, make sure that you research about the company, and you can demonstrate that through the relevant experience, or you can tie it to something, but don't make it too wordy. Like your CV should speak for itself, and this should just be like an extra additional attachment. As I mentioned, personalize it, super important. No spelling mistakes, cannot emphasize this enough. And try not to use a recruiter's name just because what if it's not the recruiter for the role, then it just, looks like you would have preferred someone else, or that that you only found one person on LinkedIn. So it's better to say, recruiting team or bird team, or whichever company you're applying for. And what I also wanted to say, if the job description is English, send the CV and the cover letter in English, also very important. There's a lot of applications, I think I've received even previous to Word, and they come in a language that I don't speak. So it is definitely important.
And you mentioned standing out and researching about the company. So let's talk a bit more about that. And let's talk about the LinkedIn etiquette, how to behave on LinkedIn. And if you want to work in the Netherlands, what should you do and not do on your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, I'm so glad whoever submitted this question, because I personally, and I don't know, I can't speak for every recruiter, I get over 200 messages a week. I get, I post a new role, I get 50 emails and saying, here's my CV, is this okay? Now, what I feel do is, and I want to start obviously with the positive side here, it's totally fine to connect with recruiters that you believe that can help you advance in your career, but you should not be treating, and this is the don't side, you should not be assuming that they're there and they're your personal recruiter. I really feel that emails like, help me find the job, here's my CV, what do you have for me, those are not the kind of emails or messages that you should be even bothering with, because I receive a lot of messages, and I'm more than happy to help anybody who asks additional questions about a posting that we have, but then they already did their research. When it's someone who clearly has not even looked on the website, it's just also quite discouraging to me. And, I have other messages that I want to also reply to where I love to put my attention to. But, it's just really about, if you connect with me, I'm going to be posting roles. It's good for you to have that connection. It gives you sort of like a more expenditure to the extent of what we're recruiting for. At the same time, just extra questions based on, I applied for this role. I was wondering whether this or this or this is happening, or what's the level, what's the specific knowledge that you're looking for above which the job description describes it, or what is the potential team size or support I would be getting. Those are totally fine questions, and I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions. But then again, the downside is, just make sure that you do your due diligence, because if you ask me to look at your CV, then the least you can do is just look on the website as well, like what is it that we are looking for, if even we are the same industry that you are looking for. So connecting, totally fine. It's not a problem at all. I think every recruiter loves connecting and having a big network. It also means that when I post a role, so many people see it. If you like it, your network sees it. That is also beneficial for me, beneficial for you. But just have that sort of common courtesy of looking on the website first and understanding, what are the offerings here. Other thing, really important, correct name usage. I know I say this a lot, attention to detail, but I've been called Thomas so many times. I just want to make sure that when you're reaching out to someone, you also make sure that, you call them on their correct name. I think that's quite important.
Thomas, that's interesting. Okay, yeah. And since you talked about researching, of course, and being familiar with the role and the company, are there any other ways in which you can stand out in addition to connecting with the recruiter and stuff like that?
Yeah, so indeed, do your research, super important. Especially if you're selected for an interview. Like, nobody likes someone who shows up and says, oh, I didn't even have time to look at like what you guys are doing. Like, that's the worst thing you can say as the first sentence coming out of your mouth in an interview. Make sure that you do your research. Make sure that you read through the job description once again before you are even coming onto the interview. And just make sure that your motivation is clear, especially when it comes to startups. Like, anybody who wants to move into a startup space, I really think that you need to have a really good motivation, because they're always going to look for that unicorn person that they want to hire. So if you don't have passion for the company, then it's probably going to resonate as well. Show up on time. Again, very cliche, and I wish I shouldn't have to say this, but a lot of people are late, or they don't tell you that they're gonna be late. And that is definitely something that's a common courtesy. If I'm late 2 minutes, even then I send an email to someone to say I'm jumping on, just running over with something else. And then, yeah, it's an open-ended question when recruiters ask you about your background, but try to not talk for 10 minutes straight, and not let anybody else get a word in. That is quite difficult then, because I have to take notes. You don't have a breather, you're just talking. And I think that you should always assume that I've seen your CV before. So what else is there, like, to your background? What is it that it ties in with the job description? What did you research about the company, and why do you think you'd be a great addition? And at the very end, again, very common thing that people always tell everybody, but ask questions. How can you not have questions? I've been at this company for 2 years. I still have questions, every day. And you should have a lot of questions, especially on the culture, on the manager, on the team size, on the responsibilities. And you really need to make sure that you ask enough questions that you can make a decision for yourself, because this is also your opportunity to interview me just as much as I am interviewing you.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of how recruiters are selecting candidates, could you also tell us a bit more about that? What do you look at? What's important?
Yeah, so I want to just maybe take a step back here, just because this isn't really the question about how we select. The question is how to make sure that you're going to get selected, right? So I think what happens a lot is you think to yourself, reading through a job description, oh my God, this is like the perfect match. This is me to the T. I'm going to apply and I'm going to, get the job. Like, it's a no-brainer. And then you get a rejection, and then it's super discouraging, because you're thinking, how am I not good enough for this role? Like, I have every single thing that they're asking for. So this time you need to look at, okay, first of all, it's possible that you're not exactly what they're looking for. That happens as well. But at the same time, if you really do feel that it was you, then I think that what you need to do is to have a look at your CV. Again, it always goes back to what's the information that I am looking at as a recruiter, right? So read through the job description. What are the main things we are looking for? What is the years of experience we're looking for? What are the skill sets that we're looking for? Languages, background, type of education, whatever it may be. Okay, so you read them all through, then look at your CV. Do we have all this information on your CV? Or do you just think that because you know that you've done it, it's there? So it really needs to be reflected on your CV as well. And you don't have to rewrite your CV for every single job. And I tell this to everybody because I get this question quite a lot as well, which in this case didn't come up, but you don't have to have 3 different, CVs to apply for, a type of role. If you are set on one type of position, you just, all I'm saying is that just look at the job descriptions and look at the common things that they're asking for, and just make sure that those are reflected in your CV. Like it really just boils down to that. The information I'm looking at is going to be your CV. So the things that are in your knowledge, I'm not going to know about. So that has to stand out. And yeah, I think that the other thing that I wanted to mention, I get a lot of people who are like, I've been to startup before, but then I moved to this and then I want to come back to startup. So you have a relevant experience from years ago, but it may be on the 3rd or the 4th page of your CV. What I always say to people, then make sure that you create a relevant experience sort of bracket on the top, and you say relevant experience to the role, right? So you just move the experience up so I can look at it, and then I see, oh, okay, this person have worked there. What else have they done? But then the first thing I see is that you have relevant experience, and that is very important. And then back to the original question, how do we select candidates? So we look at keywords. Yes, we do. We are getting accused a lot about it, but how else do you want us to even, look for someone for, operations or any sort of a finance role? They are very, very specific. You really need to look at some of the keywords as well. But how else, would we be able to identify it? But what also happens quite a lot is just, making sure that the right wording is there. So if you have done it, then just make sure that it's reflected. It doesn't have to be exactly the same keyword that we would be looking for, but if you see that we're looking for a specific skill set or specific industry, then just make sure that that's highlighted somewhere in the CV, that that's exactly what we've been looking for prior as well.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful, really. And in terms of the last question from that section, because you mentioned people applying for jobs that they possibly are not qualified for, and this is why they're getting a lot of rejections, how to identify the right opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit difficult to answer because I know a lot of people who want to change industries, right? So it is always difficult to, have that change done without having the experience in it, or vice versa. It is hard. But I think that what I would suggest is just make sure that you at least possess 70 or 80% of the qualifications that the person is looking for. And if you really, really feel like this would be a great opportunity for me, but I don't really have the experience, that's when you send the cover letter. But then you really make sure that it is personalized, that it is, having that information in there, that you can do it. And trust me, as long as recruiters are reading your CV, we see potential and we will move potentials forward as well. So if we feel that, there are transferable skills or experiences, then we will still give someone a shot. But I think that now, especially during COVID, it is really difficult, again, because we get so many applications that you really need to be super picky when it comes to, finding the perfect person for the job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with that, let's move to the last section, and then we're gonna go and have a Q&A about ghosting and being ghosted and how it works and why it happens. So yeah, how often should applicants follow up with a recruiter?
Okay, so let's take it step by step. I think ghosting, ghosting is an important topic because a lot of people say, I never heard back, I never do this, blah, blah, blah. And, I haven't heard anything since I applied. It's been like 2 months, unless you're dealing with a very, bad, recruiting. I don't think that that's a case. I do get a lot of messages from people saying, I never heard back, what's going on? And then sometimes I send them a message and then I don't hear back. So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? Check your spam folder. That is the first tip I would give. A lot of emails from our ATSs, the systems that we're using, do end up, you know, in spam folders. And then I have people replying to me 3 weeks after saying, oh yeah, I'm still up for a chat, but we already filled the position. So I'm like, you know, you need to be on the top of, you know, your inbox just as much as I have to be on mine. So yeah, this has been definitely one thing that I want to note. Thank you note and following up on that one, I think it is fine. I'm totally okay with people sending a note saying thanks for the chat, it was really nice. What I don't really like is when they basically reiterate the whole conversation we had, and it's like a 2-page long email. Trust me, I paid attention, I took notes, I know exactly what we talked about. A thank you note is more than enough. And I think that in terms of follow up, if you haven't really discussed any timelines with the recruiter, which you always should, I think that should be one of the questions in the end, like when am I going to hear back? How long would the process take? If they don't get back to you, I think in a week, again, check your spam folder. If there's nothing there, then I think after a week, it's totally fine to follow up. The other case where I would say always follow up, because you never know what's going on the back end at the company, is when you have other offers coming in, but your preference would be the company that you were chatting with. And trust me, we would want to know that you want us to prioritize you, and just to tell us, you know, hey, I'd love to move forward, but I already have maybe other conversations, final interviews, offers coming. And then definitely reach out so that they can give you an answer as quick as possible. And then I also wanted to obviously mention being ghosted. So that's definitely something that I feel like nobody really considers, that poor recruiters don't get answers either, but it actually happens. So applicants do ghost us as well, you know, and that is just as much hurtful than thinking that the recruiting team is not replying to you on time. So again, if you found another job, amazing, let me know. If you have another offer you accepted, or you want to stay at your current company, totally fine, let me know. If you don't want to continue, for any reason, you had a chat with the hiring manager and you just don't feel like this is the perfect fit, let me know. You know, if we want to move you forward and then I'm not getting any reply, it's just as much hard, you know, for me to understand what has happened. So it's definitely important for us to know just as much as for you where you stand in the process.
This is super useful. I also wonder about just one quick follow-up question about thank you notes, because while being in the US, I've often heard that, oh, you actually you must send a thank you note. Like if you don't, it's going to be like a bad image that you're going to be creating about yourself. Is it the way you think about thank you notes?
No.
To
be honest,
I think
no, I think it's not really about whether you send one or not. I think when you work for a startup, you move people so quickly that sometimes by the end of the chat, I already tell someone that we are moving forward, you know. So at that time you're like, why would you, you know, you're already moving forward, it's fine, you can just do the test that I send you, or, you know, we'll set you up with the next chat. I think that more the follow-up, or, you know, the thank you note would be that I really like that people do is when they send one after they speak to the hiring manager. I think that's nice. And they say, hey, could you just forward this below message to, you know, the hiring manager. I think that also speaks volume as to how much you want that position. So that's definitely something that I quite like.
Okay, so this is great, and we covered all the questions that we had prepared, and now it's time for Q&A. I see that we have a list of questions that all the attendees submitted. So just very quickly, before we jump right into Q&A, I want to make two announcements. So announcement number one, Products by Women is organizing this really awesome 2-day free online festival on the 26th and 27th of September. It's called Future Tech Festival, and it's going to be really great. There are going to be different panels about emerging tech with speakers from Amazon and IBM and Facebook, and Dora will be also moderating one of the panels there. And we're gonna have concerts in between to, you know, allow you to rewind and relax. So it's going to be extremely informative, and you can register for it online. It's fully free, and it's going to be great. Plenty of thought-provoking panels about holographic displays, AI, machine learning, blockchain, and stuff like that. And the second announcement is about Product by Women annual awards. You can apply online, check out their website. It's really great, especially if you're in product, tech, UX engineering. Definitely check it out. And I think that Naimisha will be adding some links in the chat so that you guys can see learn some more about those two great initiatives happening right now. And now Q&A time. So let me take a look at the chat, and I see that we have quite a lot of different questions. So I'm gonna start with just the first question that I see, which is, especially as someone who's entry level, should I wait until I get more experience in my own country before I apply to jobs in the Netherlands, even if they are also entry level? Do I stand a chance against entry level applicants actually located in the Netherlands?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think it depends. If you do need any sort of sponsorship or whatever it may be, I would definitely advise that you have a look online to see what's the highly skilled migrant salary rate is. Entry level roles are usually not eligible for visa sponsorship. So I would definitely say that yes, please stay where you are, or where you can gain a bit more experience, because I think otherwise it's going to be really difficult to find something. The other way to come to the Netherlands, and this is something a lot of people do, is if you do your master's here, if you do a bachelor here, then you get what we call the search year visa right after your studies, and then you're eligible to work for what we call the entry level salary as well for a year, so that you can gain enough experience to move into a more medium to senior position where you may be able to get sponsorship as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then we have another question. Again, it's about visa. So Austin asks, visa sponsorship here in the US is always a tricky topic, and it's always hard for applicants to assume sponsorship will be handled by the company, or if they even offer sponsorship, unless they list that explicitly. Number one, do companies in the Netherlands typically offer sponsorship for non-residents? That's the first part of the question.
And if he's asking because he wants to move here, I'm more than happy to have him. He's my ex-colleague and I loved him so much and worked with him as well. But yes, we do. Great. Yeah, they do offer sponsorships, and most of the companies are, because it is easy to get it here, and they don't want to limit. And I think the company doesn't want to limit the recruiters to only choose from the pool that we have, even though that's the pool of EU. So that's not a bad pool to have. But it is possible that that the role that you're applying, if it's in line with the salary expectations that are required for the highly skilled migrant visa, then you'd be able to get it.
Great. And then the second part of his question is it a standard practice for companies in the Netherlands to transparently let candidates know if they offer sponsorship?
Some do. Yes, actually, it is not illegal or nothing. There's no legal consequences for them to put it online. So what they usually do is they say on the job description if they don't. That's more, I think that's more, the standard rather than the other way around.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question from Julia, and she asks, I would love to know how many skills one should have on your CV. I am a designer, and the demand for program and theoretical knowledge is really high. Thus, I have at least 10 on my CV to match what they want. What's your take on this?
Yeah, have all the 10 on. I don't think that it makes sense for you to redo your CV, every time that you're applying for a job. In this case, I would just say, like, don't have them in a list that takes so much space, but just have them like next to each other in one line maybe. But it is definitely important to have it, I know, because we hire designers here too, and it is very specific, the skill sets and the tools and the stuff that we are looking for.
Then we have a question, and I think this is coming from more of the US perspective. What if someone has a lot of work experience and it does not fit into one page?
Have to.
We sort of talked
it's
about
fine.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Have to. It's totally fine. I think that it's more important that you have enough rather than not having any. Like, I think that the worst case scenario is that I have to go and look on your LinkedIn, but I would always prefer that it's 2 pages and I have bullets and I understand what you've done, rather than having to like dig through other social media services to find out more information about your background.
And to kind of follow up on that question in terms of a CV, would you say that like 2 to 3 pages is okay? What's too many pages? What do you think?
Sorry, say that again.
Like in terms of a CV, what would you say is like a typical number of pages?
Yeah, as I said, I think in the US it's one, and I think in Europe it can be up to three as well. But
Mm-hmm.
now that I'm doing US recruiting, I feel like I've seen a lot of two-pagers as well. I don't think it is that set in stone anymore. And as I said, I think I speak for all recruiters. We would always prefer to have all your experiences and understand what you've done rather than it looks like, you were cut off on one page and we don't really understand your background.
Okay, great. And then there's another question. How easy or difficult is it for someone to apply to jobs in the Netherlands and move over from the US? Is the visa process really difficult and taxing?
No,
We sort of
I
talked
think,
about, okay.
yeah, we sort of talked about this. It is not difficult and it can be done pretty quickly as well. So I wouldn't think that it is that, challenging at all. You will need to, obviously come to the Netherlands. You will need to get a social security number, and then you will have to have an appointment with the IND to get a stamp and get the approval for, your application. But that's usually something that the companies legal team and HR take care of with IND. And then once it's approved, you can go and get your paperwork and it's done. And then once you have it, this is also something maybe that's good for you guys to know. The transfer is really easy because then just a new company needs to send a note to IND to let them know that, hey, this person is actually being sponsored by us moving forward. And that's it. It is a really easy and straightforward process as well.
Mm. And then we have another question, and it asks about how important is it for applicants to be proficient in Dutch in the case of the Netherlands for software developer roles?
I don't think it is at all. I think that especially in IT, I think that everywhere I look here, like we have really big companies here like Netflix and Booking and Uber, and I can really say that, most of the tech side of it is always international. So it is not important unless it is a Dutch startup, which only has Dutch people. Then even then probably they would be open to someone who is not Dutch, but then you would probably not appreciate it that much because you wouldn't be able to understand, on the day-to-day what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I'm still looking through the questions. I think that those are pretty much all the questions that we had. If I have not read your question, if you could maybe put it in the chat, or if you have any more questions, feel free to add them to the chat as well. In the meantime, I'm just gonna scroll through and see if there's anything that I missed in terms of the questions. Someone is saying that ghosting is indeed a really huge problem, and that
I saw
someone
that.
got, yes, and it says that there's like no email to follow up. And what do you do if there's no email, there's no follow up, and there's no information at all?
Yeah, so I understand what you say. I think that this can happen quite a lot when they have maybe, a lot on, they have a lot of applications, and timing is everything. So if you see that the role has been open for over a month, I think, Julia, specifically about this one though, I think that it can also be that it's just a fake job online. You really need to make sure that the company is actually recruiting. I heard this now a lot with COVID, that there's definitely an increased amount of sort of showing as like there are roles open and then there isn't, and then they just basically close the role and then that's it, and then they have a database of candidates. So there are two reasons for doing this. One, it's possible that they just want to like fill up their database with candidates that later on they might be needing. At the same time, it's also possible that they just didn't take it off, so it doesn't look like they're not recruiting anymore, which is obviously not nice for anybody who's looking for a position. So what I would say, if you see that the recruiters are active, and this is why it's good that you add recruiters on LinkedIn, if you see that the recruiters are active, then you know that they're recruiting. Then you know that if you apply, that it should never take 2-3 months, to get an application reply. That is just too long. You don't want to work for a company like that. So I would just say goodbye next.
Yeah. And we have two more questions. So, three
Yeah.
more questions.
Okay.
Okay, so someone's asking about MBA. How is it looked
Yeah.
upon, and does it make a candidate more competitive?
Yes, it does. And I went to specifically to France last year to INSEAD to have people from from the MBAs there, just have a chat with them. What are they looking for? I think that the only maybe drawback from having an MBA is that some people don't have enough work experience next to the MBA, and that could be that when a company is looking for a specific amount of years of experience, then your MBA is actually an extra added thing and not, does not really count towards the same thing with internships. So when people are like, yeah, but I've been doing internships here and there, normally when we are discussing it, that's not really what they're looking for when it comes to years of experience. So you really need to be specific. What have you done for your MBA? If you were in a graduate scheme or something afterwards, and what have you been doing there, just to make sure that any recruiter really sees it as a relevant experience as well.
So I think we have time for two questions.
Sure.
So the first question, I think the response will be relatively short because it's about whether candidates can apply to roles that are posted in Dutch, even if they don't know Dutch. What's your recommendation
I wouldn't.
there?
It means that they're looking for a Dutch speaker, so don't even. It's just a waste of your time.
Okay, and then the last question is, hi, I'd like to know a bit more about how COVID-19 has affected recruiting business in general, either in the US or in the Netherlands, such as the change of the recruiting demand from the employers and the candidate pool size. Thank you.
Yeah. As I said, so much more applications to go through, on a daily basis. Is definitely challenging, but it also makes me quite, humble, because so many really, really good backgrounds are coming through. And I'm kind of sad that I only have one role to fill when you have so many really, really good people to chat to. The good thing is that the companies that are still recruiting, they seem to be, looking for all the different kinds of experiences. And what I can say is that obviously the demand has changed, and there's a lot more competition, but it's just more should be emphasizing the fact that you should also be looking for the right opportunity that will definitely consider you for. So yes, the demand grew, but at the same time, I kind of see some roles coming back online as well. So it's kind of makes me hopeful that we will be able to, do some countering on the losses of the positions.
Okay, so with that, we're going to end our session for today. Dora, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
I've learned so much from you today, and I hope,
No
and
worries.
I think that everyone learned a lot, and everyone's saying thank you. So it was
and you're
really
more than
lovely
welcome to
speak
add
with
me on
you.
LinkedIn. I saw one of a fellow Hungarian's questions, so more than welcome to add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect.
Yes, so thank you so much, and see you all soon. We're going to be organizing more events, including Future Tech Festival, which is going to be great. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are, and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you. Bye.
Bye.